Okay, that's done. And now, Fernanda, I'm going to make some tests with you, okay?
Yes.
I sent you a link on WhatsApp. Can you open this link, please?
Yes.
And tell me if you are listening to us in English or in Portuguese. And Marli, can you please speak something in Portuguese so that Fernanda can see which sound is going on the other side of YouTube?
Okay, I'll just
Okay.
could you mute your up here on?
Yeah, no, I just heard it's in English. So I'm going to so we're going to do the following, okay? We are going to
something in Portuguese so that Fernanda can see.
I can hear my voice. Yeah, so it's going on in English in Zoom, in YouTube. Okay, cool. So we are going to direct this link to everybody. I'm going to send them an email, and we are going to hear in English on YouTube. Okay. So guys, I'm sending to everybody. Okay. Good evening, everybody. We are facing some challenges over here, and it's more interesting because we solve it alive. So I'm sending to everybody now a link to YouTube. Okay. For those who are listening in English and could please go to YouTube, I would be very thankful. Those comments on the just one important point. Those comments that you make in written over here, we are going to take to Larry. So if you write your question on YouTube, we are going to make to take to Larry either way. So there's no big difference. Okay. So for those who are listening in English, I would appreciate a lot if you move to YouTube and give your seat to someone who needs to listen in Portuguese. And sorry for that, guys.
Should I leave too? I think I should stay, right?
No, Fernanda, you stay because you need to help me with pressing buttons.
Okay, so I'll send the link to everybody.
Yeah. And okay, that's the first part. Cool. Now I'm going to send an email to everybody who assigned to this event, telling basically this. And this is here. And cool. It seems to be working. Fernanda, please press all the buttons as I organize other things over here.
The link is open.
Okay, so now I send the email to everybody, and so I'm going to repeat everything, okay? First, for some reason that I cannot understand, we are limited to 100 people in Zoom. It should be 500. Something went wrong. I don't know yet. So we decided to make a live transmission on YouTube. It's a closed link. Only you know this link, so anyone else can watch it. And I ask that everybody that's going to or everybody that can watch it in English, please watch it on YouTube, okay? There is no difference. It's exactly the same thing. For those who are going to listen in Portuguese, please stay here and press the button Portuguese. And I'm going to say this in Portuguese now, okay? Pessoal, a gente teve aí problemas técnicos com o limite, com a capacidade do Zoom, e as pessoas que vão assistir em inglês, ou quem pode assistir em inglês, eu, assim, agradeço muito se puderem assistir no YouTube, ok? O link do YouTube não tem limitação de pessoas assistindo, o link do Zoom, por alguma razão que é totalmente desconhecida, está com uma limitação. Então, a gente só consegue fazer a transmissão em português dentro do Zoom. Então, quem vai assistir em português, eu peço que fique ali embaixo, nas opções da tela, tem um botão interpretação ou interpretation em inglês, e aí basta clicar em PT português, que vocês vão acessar um outro áudio para vocês conseguirem assistir em português. Ótimo. Great. So I am moving to English now. And, repito, quem quiser assistir em português é só clicar no botão que tem uma transmissão, a Marli está fazendo a transmissão ao vivo. So I'm moving back to English now. And we have 80 people inside Zoom. So I understand that everybody that's feeling that's comfortable in following us in English is already at YouTube. If someone asks you what's going on, if you could please send the link of YouTube, I would appreciate it a lot. Well, I am deeply sorry for all of this, but I was surely it would not be a problem. I have organized myself to make a presentation of 5 minutes of Larry for tonight, but we have lost some 13 minutes with all of this confusion. But I need you all to fill a form so that we know that you are here. So first, I'm going to put on the chat, the Zoom chat, the link for the form so that you can answer for us. And it's over there.
And I can copy for you in the YouTube transmission.
Yeah, I'm going to, yeah, it's going to be, yeah, I can do it as well. This is the easy part.
So we're gonna take 2 minutes for you to fill out, because that's important for you to get your certificate for your for those 2 days of sessions. We hope we will fix that by the time next Wednesday, the second session, but sorry for this problem, and I would like to, while you fill out the form, that's quite important for us to get information on you and send you the materials for next class. I'd like to welcome Professor Larry Pozner. That's one or maybe the most famous trial advocacy lawyers in the US. It's a great honor for us for the curso prático de arbitragem. I will translate that in Portuguese. We know that have this course for almost 20 years now. For 10 years, we have doing this course as a very practical approach. Since 2019, we are open doing course online. And for a long time, trying to, we brought Professor Pozner once, I think it was 2018, if I'm not mistaken. He could correct me, 2018. We have a very good feijoada and watched some Ross races and have a very good time in Rio. And I miss him being here. But we're quite glad to have Professor Pozner back, unfortunately online, because he's really a leading lawyer on that, and have been trying to teach you cross-examination for those 20 years. We have very good classes with professors with international knowledge and international experience, but Professor Pozner is probably the best one. So it's quite an honor, and he has a classic book on cross-examination. You receive it today, and we're going to receive again on Wednesday a coupon to get a big discount on his book. That's cross-examination, science, and technique. Because cross-examination is partially a science, a very strict science, and part an art. It's like any lawyering. It's a science and it's an art, and Pozner, it's a great art, and it's like Beethoven of cross-examination. He's one of the best trial lawyers in the US. He's a professor at the Denver College of Law, where he was top tier university. He was voted best professor, so he's the best of one of the best. His book, as I said, is a classic, now the third edition, and it's the America's best-selling book on cross-examination. There are, if you do a search, you have 5,000 of books on cross-examination. His book is the number one. Very famous trial lawyer. And he participated in very famous cases. So we wanted to bring the best for you to hear how to do a cross-examination from a real trial lawyer, maybe probably one of the best. And that's very important, not only for who will do arbitration, but also now from 2015, the Brazilian Code of Civil Procedure has allowed lawyers to direct cross-examine. There were restrictions beforehand. So any lawyer that doing litigation, not only arbitration, but also in civil procedure, have to learn how to do cross-examination, and you'll be learning from the best. So without further ado, I pass the floor to Larry Pozner, great professor, trial lawyer, and I heard also very good in snowboarding, but he asked me not to mention that.
Thank you. I am not sure I can live up to that introduction in English or in Portuguese. What we're going to do today is talk about a method, not individual ideas, but a construct of how to approach and deliver cross. And what we want to say here is that it doesn't matter what kind of case we are trying, we are doing the same thing. We are asking questions designed to get a fact into evidence that a judge can understand. And we are talking to people about the themes of life: greed, apprehension of losing a job, desire for a promotion, desire to make themselves look better. And these themes repeat throughout our career. And so once we learn techniques for any one case, we've learned techniques that will work in many cases to come. And so what we're trying to do today is talk about this method. And these are set forth in the book. And what we're saying here is that cross-examination is not this making it up as we go. It is not trying to, as we say, ring the bell. It is not trying to be dramatic. It is simply delivering information so that judges can understand how we are winning, how our theory is coming through, or conversely, how we are weakening the opponent's theory with our facts. And we do this by simply applying techniques, and the techniques are easier learned outside of trial than in trial. This notion that we learn to be trial lawyers in trial is not accurate. Yes, every trial we do will teach us lessons, But we would be better off, and our clients would be better off, if we went to trial knowing the techniques. And once we see a technique today, you will see that it takes minimal mental effort to reproduce it under stress in a courtroom. So what are we going to do? We're going to talk today. We're going to, this afternoon, actually, we're going to talk about constructive cross and the chapter method. And then we're going to talk Wednesday about page preparation and controlling the witness. But first, let us take a detour into the science of the human mind, because the science has a great deal to do with what we do for a living. Think of yourself as a teacher. We must teach the case. Advocating the case, rhetoric, flowery language is not what wins. What wins is a judge understanding the points we are making. And as we go through this today, there are some icons that will be on slides. When you see one of these heads, it will show whose head we are talking about. When I talk about jurors, we try most cases in the United States to jurors. I understand you try most cases to judges. Judges are easier. They are more experienced. They get the point quicker. But every technique we are doing works just as well with a judge. We have learned from science how people make decisions. The modern brain, the modern understanding is that the brain does not process information equally. What happens, we have learned, is that through a concept called behavioral economics. Behavioral economics is a science advanced since the 1970s, and it won a Nobel Prize in 2002. People make decisions using predictable but sometimes illogical shortcuts. And we need to be aware of the shortcuts and take advantage of them in our methods of questioning. Then we have cognitive neuroscience. How does the brain listen to information and process it? And what we're going to learn is the brain searches for a corollary. It searches to compare our theory of the case with some life experience that judge has had. And we're going to call up selected life experiences so the judge feels comfortable with our theory. And then we have cognitive psychology. How the brain perceives and applies information is unequal. The brain prefers information that substantiates what a person was already believing. And the brain filters out contradictory information. And for this reason, it is important that we grab the brain of the judge early. And often that is done through the opening statement that says to the judge, here is where my case is going. Here are the parts that are most important. Now, we're trying to influence with our cross-examination techniques how a judge makes decisions, how a witness can be taught to obey and answer the questions, and how we can make our lives easier under pressure. The brain takes these shortcuts, and they're called heuristics. Heuristics are simple procedures that help people find adequate answers to difficult questions, though the process is imperfect. Let me show you some heuristics we'll be using, some science. The confirmatory heuristic, people tend to pay more attention to any part of the cross that substantiates, that supports their pre-existing belief. And that's why we need to give them in opening facts so that they can see how we intend to win or the weaknesses of the opponent's case. Then there's the availability heuristic. When people can think of an example, they think that thing happens more often than it really does. We want to make our case sound normal, like, of course, our theory makes sense. Hindsight heuristic, when mind knows how a story turns out, It interprets facts to logically fit it. In the halo heuristic, once people form an impression of a witness, they likely stick with the impression. And so when we are going to cross-examine a witness, what we do is early in the cross, we do damage to their credibility, and the judge thinks less of their testimony throughout the case. Now, this is a sign for a chapter, and today we talk about a chapter method of organization. What is a chapter? A chapter is a group of leading questions. We begin broadly. We introduce the subject so the judge knows where we are in the case. We start generally, we become more specific, and the bottom of a chapter is ordinarily not a bang, I got my key fact. The bottom of a chapter is simply recognition that we have created the picture we wanted. In marketing, this is called the takeaway. Does the judge get the takeaway from what we are saying? For instance, are we saying that somebody who made decisions was incapable, lacked the training to make those decisions? Can we say that somebody was sloppy in their work? What is the takeaway of any one chapter? Let us talk about this. Most of the things we do in trial, most of our crosses are not just individual stories. They are groups of stories. If we want to show, for instance, that somebody breached a contract, we would not have a single chapter that says you breached. We would ordinarily have multiple chapters that explain the significance of the provision and what the person did to breach it. And if we have multiple breaches, we would separate them out and tell a story of each breach. When we break a story into smaller stories, we make it easier for people to learn. And that is called a chapter bundle, a group of related stories that we perform one right after the other to tell a larger story. Sometimes we do techniques where we can even number and say, you'll do this first, then this, and I can show you those numbers. Let's look at, for instance, when we do a things not done cross, when we want to show that somebody should have done something and didn't, we show that their job included doing a thing, or due diligence would have required them to do a thing. Then we show the importance of that thing, and then we show that they didn't do the thing. So we're going to apply these lessons throughout. And when you see the book, it simply means that I have written on this subject in greater detail in the book. And we will cover parts of the book today, the most important parts, which is the chapter method of cross. The shortest path to winning involves understanding. We need to identify the facts we need for a judge to understand. These are our goals. And now we're concentrating on our head. We cannot teach well unless we can already envision the lesson. Then, in the chapter method of cross, we use the opponent's witnesses to provide as many of the facts as possible. This is more persuasive than trying to prove all of our best facts to our witness. And then we teach stories in a way so that judges understand them at the time we are doing them. By the time we get to closing argument, minds have been made up. What we want to do is make cross a series of stories. So a story at a time, a judge says, I see what you are saying. Remember the hindsight heuristic. when the mind knows how a story turns out, it interprets the facts as saying, well, of course that's true. Now, we're going to take advantage of this. For instance, let me give you an example. There is a lawsuit against a stock brokerage company. It had many of its clients invested in an insurance company that sold an insurance product called an annuity. We say that the brokerage company knew the annuity company was failing. And we have told the judge very early the company did fail. And then the judge knows it from the lawsuit, from simply reading the lawsuit. So the judge knows the insurance company fails. Now, if we do chapters that say you at the brokerage firm observed that the insurance company had several different changes of ownership, you knew that it was losing money year after year, you knew that it even disbanded its sales force, then what the judge says is, I know the company failed, and now it is obvious to me that you should have known it failed. So what we are doing is we are taking advantage of how people learn, how they translate information. And we are moving from a destructive cross, from the picture of cross that is an attack, to a modern form of cross, which is constructive cross. Now, here we have a mind shift. Here we must move away from historically how cross has been taught. We're going to expand the purpose of modern cross. We are going to stress using cross to win, not simply to defend. And that is going to take us into cross-centered preparation and cross by storytelling. There is something in science called the shifting baseline syndrome. Every generation accepts that however we are taught is normal. But perhaps we have not been taught correctly. Perhaps we need to rethink what we call a normal situation. In cross-examination, we have frequently been taught that cross is so dangerous that we should save up our stories and use direct examination, calling witnesses, to win our case. Modern cross says it is easier to win the case the more things we get an opposing witness to agree to. Old style cross says, therefore, minimize the cross examinations. Modern cross says, no, cross often gets longer because we are using their witnesses to tell stories that support our theory or undermine the opponent's theory. Old style cross says cross is primarily an attack. And it looks good on TV and we see it in the movies, but again, when we examine it, it is old style. Modern cross says, where can we get the opponent's witness to agree with facts we like or to expand on facts we like? Now, in addition, we will do all of the impeachments we always were going to do. We are not getting rid of the attacking part of cross. We are adding to it the teaching part of cross, using the opponent's witness to put in facts we like. So you see, we are now expanding the role of cross-examination. We are concentrating on how to use the opponent's witness. And this is going to take advantage of the psychology of how people make decisions. Let me show you. In old style cross, we saved up our points and made them through our witnesses. In modern cross, when you are thinking of calling a witness, any witness, our client, we start with a private scorecard what are the important facts we intend to get from our witness? We do not generalize. We do not say, I'm calling my witness so he can tell his story. What does that mean? What are the important facts we want? These are the reasons we are thinking of calling a witness, and these are the pluses. And then what we do is we turn to the opponent's witness list and we say, which of these facts can I get from a witness for the opponent? And we try to write a cross that gets the witness to talk about that thing. Now, there are some things we agree we're not going to get from them. Fine, then we don't cross on that. But many times, there are a great many of our facts that we can get their witness to agree to. And when their witness agrees to it, a judge will never disagree with it. When we can cross to obtain a plus fact, a reason to call our witness, we simply draw a line through that reason. Now, we are still left with the minuses. Every witness we call has some things they are going to say that we don't like. Keep track of these. Do not believe our opponents will miss them. Assume they will be prepared and will get them. What we are doing now is, having gotten many of our plus facts through an opposing party's witness, we look at the minuses and we say, is it worth it to call this witness? Even if we call the witness, our direct examinations will be shorter. We are getting more pluses, more facts that we need from the opponent's witnesses, which mean fewer direct examinations, which means shorter direct examinations, which means safer direct examinations. Constructive cross relieves the judge's anxiety because the judge does not have to make a credibility decision. In ordinary cross, where we set up a series of fights, we are saying to a judge, I can win this fight. You will believe my witness more than their witness. But in constructive cross, what we are going to do is get facts out of the mouth of the hostile witness. And a judge is going to say, logically and legally, this witness would not have admitted that fact if it were not true. The judge will know we couldn't have prepared this witness. They're not ours. A fact we get from an opponent's witness is more solid. It is more believable than if we got the identical testimony from our witness. Now, among the things we are going to do is we are going to focus the case ordinarily on problems with our opponent's theory. We're going to show defects in the opponent's conduct, whether we are plaintiff or defendant. By focusing on the conduct of the opponent, the judge looks for defects. The judge finds imperfections. The more time we spend examining their conduct, the safer we are. We are in danger when we say to a judge that our client has done everything reasonably. Do not make our client into a hero. It is easier to make the opponent, plaintiff or defendant, into someone who has been insufficient, has been defective in their performance. So we spend more time examining the conduct of the opponent's witnesses. So what are we doing now? We are now building our theory using their witnesses. For instance, a corporation tried to save money and it cost people in defective products or in injuries. The defendant was reckless in his conduct, or the plaintiff ignored the safety instructions on the equipment, or the plaintiff made a deal and got paid everything, and now the plaintiff regrets the deal. We are going to use their witnesses for our purposes, and this is going to shake to the core the opponent. What opposing lawyers do is they get their witness ready to protect a story to be told in direct. And they do not understand that the cross may take the witness into other things that they were less prepared to discuss, things we want to discuss. So using this method, how we build our theory with their witnesses. Take a look at this. A man leaves his company and takes with him valuable computer records. He is sued for theft of trade secrets, and he says these are not trade secrets. And we say, what you did is you knew your own book of business. You knew who had a retirement account. You knew who had the highest value retirement accounts. These are things you do not share with others. These were private information only you had, and you had it only because you worked for our company. Now, you can only roll the money out to a new investment if it is past a certain period of time. You knew which accounts were past the rollout penalty period. And there is no list publicly available of the investors who have these characteristics. So you see, instead of waiting and calling our client to explain this, we are going to use their client to do the same thing. And it will have more impact because the judge loves to write, even the opponent admits, or even the defendant admits X, because that means the judge didn't have to make a credibility decision. Let's look at a modern way.
Larry,
Yes,
can I pose a question that
Yes.
popped up here on the chat? This question came on Zoom, okay, and it's in Portuguese. And Thiago made a very good question, actually, that on a subject that I was going to touch on the opening that I prepared. And so just one point before passing the question
of course.
to Larry. So Larry is an American lawyer, an American trial lawyer, and he's studying us about techniques regarding cross-examination. We know that in Brazil, we are still developing the cross-examination method as a whole. So we need to look for someone, we need to listen from someone that has been dealing with these techniques and see how and to which extent we are going to use in our practice. And then comes the question of Thiago, okay? This is the premise. Thiago is asking, how to use the modern technique, making the witness of the other side telling the case that we want her to tell, without making the judge understand that we are leading too much the witness. And then the question is how to do all of this without leading the witness. And this is a very important issue here because there is a difference between America and Brazil. And the basics of the technique in the US is to lead is to present leading questions. We see more and more these techniques being used in arbitration, but actually I've used some leading questions on civil procedure as well. But the point here is to understand how the whole technique is presented. So Larry, sorry for these long comments, but these are important.
It's very important. Lucas is exactly right. In America, what we teach is the importance of the leading question. We want to lead as much as we can. And in America, we have schooled our judges to expect more leading. To the extent you can do it, you should prefer it. But if you had a judge who was resistant to it, a way to lead without leading is to get into documents, for instance, where you have what we would call a hard-edged answer. The witness did a thing. The witness said a thing. The witness wrote a thing. And we have that thing in front of us. And if we have a judge who is resistant to leading, we get them into the document and we ask the open-ended question that causes the witness to be forced to read from the document the fact we like. So in a leading sense, we would say, and then you wrote X. But if we have a judge resistant to leading, we would say, now let's look at the document. And one of the things that came up was the subject of, could you find in the document what you said? And let me help you. And we show them and we force them, will you read to the judge what you said, what you wrote? Now we try to stay away from abstractions. Facts can be true and untrue. Abstractions are just a witness's thinking on the point. So for instance, I would stay away from, why did you say that? Because it is dangerous. I can't control the answer to why. I can control, in a non-leading way, who did you send the memo to? Because we know it's addressed. Let's talk about, when did you send this memo? Let's talk about how the memo, who created the memo. When we know the answer, an answer, a fact, we are safer if we have to get out of leading. But where we don't want to get out of leading is into questions that just call on a witness to reflect on their thinking, because if we don't have a hard edge, a fact to stop them, they can say anything they want. Do we need more on this? More questions, perhaps?
Actually, I found the answer very illustrative. I see no questions over here. Guys, feel free to present this question. And Larry, please, you have the floor.
Even if we were in non-leading questions, it would not change our organization. What we would do is begin the case by writing the crosses we want to deliver. Now, if we begin with the crosses and we see what facts we are going to get from the opponents, we now have a safety zone. We now know a core of facts that we believe we will always get. And remember, because we are getting these out of the mouth of the opponent's witness, it is immediately believable. An opposing lawyer cannot successfully argue to a judge to not believe an answer given by their own witness. They can urge a judge not to believe something our witness has said, but it is logically impossible for them to say to a judge, I know I have this witness, but don't believe them. Now, let me ask a question. In commercial litigation, if we are plaintiff, are we allowed to call the defendant in our case?
Guys, if you want to answer, feel free.
Do we have an answer?
No, but we have actually a very good question on the chat, but we can take this one later.
So tell me the answer in Brazil. In arbitration, can you call as plaintiff the defendant to testify, or must you wait for the defendant to take the stand in the defense case?
We can. Actually, we should in civil procedure, we should ask the other party to be there. Otherwise, it's not going to be there.
This is great. Now look what we're doing when we write the crosses for the opponent. They are less schooled the earlier they are called. The longer they sit in the courtroom and hear the other witnesses, the more they can shape their testimony to fit what the other witnesses say. And instead, when we call them, we have a less prepared witness, and we get admissions from the defendant, from the opposing party, immediately. And as we are going to discuss, once the brain has a belief, it sorts evidence it hears, looking for things that support the belief. Our minds are not equal in how they weigh testimony. Once we begin to believe something, we look for evidence that tells us we are right, and we disregard evidence that tells us we may not be right. Now, let us say we are on the defense, and I do commercial litigation, both plaintiff and defense. When I am on the defense, I know that they are going to call plaintiff. And so I am building my crosses for plaintiff. And we are going to do damage to the opponent's case, plaintiff or defense, as early as possible. Now, having written the crosses and seeing what we are going to develop, now we can write the opening statement. Are we giving openings in our arbitrations, Lucas?
Yes, we can assume so.
This is perhaps the area we can make the greatest difference. When we open strongly, we do two things. We make sure a judge knows our theory, and we tell the judge our best facts, not a promise that someday the judge will hear our best facts. We use our best facts. Let me show you, we say to the judge, a timeline. Let me show you what they hid from us. Let me show you their behaviors. We say to a judge in outline form our best material. And how do we know our best material? Because we've already written our crosses. The strong opening gets a judge ready for the crosses, but it does more than that. The strong opening based on facts causes a judge to begin to believe a certain way. And remember what we have learned from science already. Once the mind is tilted in a direction, it cannot help itself. It listens more closely for evidence that supports it than evidence that contradicts its belief. And so we want to, by the end of opening, have a judge. We don't have to have a judge convinced we are right. We have to have a judge that understands our theory. Now, of course, the judge understands the opponent's theory. That was their job. And we have told the judge the weaknesses factually in the opponent's theory. And now the judge is listening differently. Let's just take a quick look at this. If you talk as a plaintiff about a contract and the ways the defendant tried to get around the contract, and you lay them out. Now remember, we wouldn't say, and Your Honor, we're going to show you that he tried to get around the contract. We would say, Your Honor, you tried to get around a contract, and there are many ways, but let me talk to you about three of the most important things the defendant did. He did one, he did two, he did three. Now, when the defendant takes the stand, the judge says before the first word, oh, I've heard about you. I've heard about some of the things you did. I hear about some of the things that you hid from the plaintiff. See, it is true the opening statement is not evidence in that the court can't decide a case based on openings, but it is evidence in the mind. The mind cannot say, I've heard the opening, but since it's not evidence, I will pretend I didn't hear it. So now we have the opening that gets a judge ready for the crosses. Now we look at the directs, but we don't promise too much in directs. We want to under-promise in the directs because we will be downgraded for everything we promise and don't deliver. Under-promise, over-deliver. Voir dire, we don't need to worry about. You're not picking a jury. And the
Larry,
closing, yes.
Can I pose a question
Yes.
on the direct examination issue? First, we have some really seasoned professionals over here. One of them is Tonico Monteiro. He's hearing for us from you, and he made a very good question. Actually, we were talking about this issue yesterday. The question is how to cross someone that has not provided any statement or has not been deposed. And then he follows on the question with how to prepare in such a scenario. And the question is especially important for us Brazilians because we don't have a deposition in Brazil. Deposition is kind of a pre-hearing of the witness. Okay, everybody? And even though we use written statements more and more in arbitration, it's not a rule. So how to organize, how to prepare if we don't know what the witness is going to talk about.
In America, we face this frequently in criminal defense litigation. There are no depositions in most of our states. And as you might imagine, in criminal defense, there are very few documents. So we have faced this. Everybody who is called is a storyteller. What is the story that they are telling? We may be ready for the story, but not know which witness it's going to come from. And so we may have a cross that we wrote out for somebody else that now works for this witness because this witness is telling that story. Another thing we do, we listen very carefully to the opponent's opening statement because in their opening statement, they will give us a preview of the stories they are going to tell, even if they don't name the witness who is going to tell them. They will say, this is what I want the court to know, and we prepare crosses for that. So sometimes we are looking at documents we have, and we are preparing a cross on the documents, but not knowing which witness we'll use it on. Because we don't know which witness there is going to talk about the documents. But we can fill in the name later. The key thing is to know the documents. Now, let us assume we have none of those things. The witness takes the stand, and the witness tells a series of stories. Think to yourself as you listen to a witness, what are the chapters you are in? You don't know you're in a chapter. You don't think you're in chapters, but I will divide what I am hearing into little stories. Now, take the legal pad, and at the top of the legal pad, on the very first story you hear, give it a title. And make your notes for possible cross on that sheet of paper. Now, here is the important technique. When the opponent then says to the witness, and now let's go to the second phone call, turn the sheet of paper over, get a new sheet of paper, and write the second phone call and your notes. So in other words, we are taking notes on the story, but we are breaking their story down into what we think of as chapters. Now, the judge says it is time for cross-examination, and we say, always, may I have a moment? And the judge always says, of course. Maybe it's time for the lunch recess, which is even better, or the morning or afternoon recess. But even if it is not, take a few minutes. Look at the chapters the witness has testified to and see if we have written crosses for somebody else that will work on this witness. See where the witness is important and where we feel comfortable in a cross in certain areas. So if the witness testified to 10 things, we may look up and say, I cannot cross on 10. I don't have good material on 10. When we do not have good material, we don't get in. We don't do it because we're just making it more important and losing. We take the chapters that have things we like and we do them. And then one more thing, a very important thing. What does the witness know that they haven't talked about? Or what does the witness know that they hinted at but really didn't expand on? Now, here's what we do. When we are crossing with no documents, no deposition, no preparation, we are in a more dangerous cross. Begin a dangerous cross with the easiest stuff first. Don't get into the worst of it. Get into things where the witness said something and you liked it and say, let's talk about that some more. Take the parts where the witness admitted certain facts that fit our theory and get more. Do the easy stuff first. And then only pick the chapters where you see an angle. If we do not see an angle, don't do it. You say, but aren't I giving it up? If we had a good answer, we would be crossing. If we don't have a good answer, we're just making it more important. We'll win the case anyway. Questions on this?
Larry, I have a question. Actually, who has a question is Arthur Watt from the Brazilian Oil Agency. You said about giving the best at the beginning of the oral pleading. But should we write that as a submission, or should we keep for the opening and for cross-examination? If you have something that's a killer, should we anticipate in your written briefs, or should we keep for the opening to make more difficult for the other party to prepare for that argument?
It's a wonderful question, and there is an answer. And the answer is based on science. Okay? Remember, once people begin to believe, they tend to stick to their belief. The most important thing is to develop belief in our case as early as possible. Therefore, do not keep secrets. If you have killer stuff, do it. Do it in motions, do it in opening. Let the opponent worry about how they're going to cope with it. The most important thing we do in cross is teach. And if we keep a secret, we are keeping the secret not just from the opponent, we're keeping it from the judge. We want the judge to see the weaknesses in the opponent's case before we ever get to trial. And so hit them with your best stuff every time. Now, the beauty of this is not only are we shaping the belief of the judge early, but opponents always think that if we revealed all these things, how much more do we have that we didn't tell them? They always believe that there are secrets, and it drives them crazy. That's their problem. Let us back out and look at it one more way. Trial is really not a contest between lawyers. Trial is a question of burdens of proof and evidence. The only party that matters, the only vote we need is the vote of the judge, the arbitrator. And so we do everything we can to educate the arbitrator, and we don't worry about what the opponent is doing because truthfully, there isn't much we can do to change that. They do what they do, and we do what we do, but we do it with more science and more detail in a way that's more understandable. And that's why we win. Okay? Now we're going to go just a couple more minutes and then we'll take you wanted to take a break, Lucas, for a few minutes? Is that what you wanted?
Yes, yes.
Okay. We'll do one more thing and then we'll take a break. So here we are, right to what we've been talking about. We use the opening statement to pre-sell the crosses we're going to deliver. We want the judge to know our best stuff. We want the judge to know the weaknesses in their case. Now, you may say, but having told them the weaknesses, aren't they going to fix them? Well, first, if it was fixable, they would have fixed it by now. Most weaknesses in a case are not fixable. They are explainable, but explanations just get people into more trouble. Think of it this way. When I am getting my client ready to testify, a project I hate, I say to my client, here are the questions I will ask, and here are the answers I expect. And here is the cross, and on cross, answer the question truthfully. Do not worry whether it helps you or hurts you. I will lawyer the case. You must answer the questions honestly and as few words as possible. If the answer to the leading question is yes, say yes. Don't say yes, but let me explain. Because the more words that come out of the mouth of a witness, the more they are likely to say something dumb that kills the case. And so let us apply this now to our opening statement. We tell the opponent the weaknesses in their case, and if they are foolish enough to try to talk to their witnesses and coach their witnesses on how to answer, it is likely the witness is going to get in trouble. The most persuasive thing a witness can ever say is the truth. And I can explain is a way of saying, I hate the truth. Let me try to diffuse it. Do not worry about opponents. Do our best teaching mechanism and let them fret on how to cope with us. Now we'll take a 10-minute break. It's 4:09. Oh, it's actually it's 8:09, right? And
Yeah.
we will come back in 10 minutes. All right.
Larry,
Okay.
let me check. Maybe we could we make only 5 minutes break
5 minutes
because
would
we
be
are
fine.
I
Yes,
think
5
5
minutes. They're
minutes
all
will
at
be
home.
better.
They don't need to go far. Okay.
you sorry Joaquin.
I think 5 minutes will be better.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Okay. Perfect. So it's 8:09. We'll come back at 8:10 now. 8:15 we'll come back.
We'll come
Vamos
back
até
to the chapter now.
comerciar, pessoal. Comercial aqui do livro dele.
And actually, the Larry sent us today. I'm not sure if everybody read the email. He provided us with 15% on the book, and the book is amazing. Okay, there's, I don't know, it's gigantic. Everything you need to know you can find over there. So yeah, so don't lose this opportunity.
Okay, are we back?
Hey,
Hello.
hi. Whenever I think whenever you are ready.
Okay. Now we've developed a new mindset of the importance of cross and using cross not simply to disagree with witnesses, but to cause witnesses to agree with things, with facts we like, to help us tell stories we want to tell. Now let us move into the chapter method where we tell these stories. Modern cross is designed to use your talents to the maximum. In cross-examination, we like leading questions, and no matter how few or as many as you can do more leading in cross than you are allowed to do in direct. The beauty of you being the focus of the examination is you become the teller of stories, and we ask witnesses to affirm the stories we want to talk about. And we can calculate the techniques. We can write our chapters in advance so we know where we are going. The witness may not. Now look at direct examination. It is open-ended questions, which means we are the listener to the story, not the leader of the story. And the person who is telling the story is an amateur. You are a professional at storytelling. You are a professional at teaching. And cross in a modern method is teaching. So let us talk about the techniques of the chapter method, this science of breaking things down into small stories. Then we'll talk about chapter bundles and individual chapters. I want to talk to you about a fascinating thing. It is called a trim tab. At the beginning of World War II, the Treaty of Versailles was abrogated, and Germany, among others, began to build giant warships. And so America and others tried to catch up. As these giant warships were built, they discovered that the rudder needed to be so large that the mechanisms available would not cause the rudder to turn. It was hard to turn the rudder because the water pressure was so great on so big a rudder. Now you can see that a warship that can only go straight has a real problem. And so the call went out to scientists and engineers. How do we cope with this? We cannot make the rudder smaller, and it's so big we can't get it to turn. And the answer came by a scientist, an engineer who said, stop trying to turn the big rudder. All you need to do is build a small rudder that you can turn. And if you turn the small rudder, it will use the sea's pressure to turn the big rudder. And in science, they called the small rudder a trim tab, and scientists called it the trim tab principle. And here is the science. A small change sometimes can bring about a very big result. Let me give you another trim tab. When doctors across the world wanted to change the infection rate in countries that had very poor healthcare systems, had rural healthcare systems, they couldn't get enough medicine to them. They didn't have enough money to build the necessary hospitals. It seemed impossible. And then doctors said, what would change the infection rate? And the answer was soap. Teach people to wash their hands, and it will change the infection rate greater than all the money we could pour into hospitals. A small change in the right place creates a big impact. The chapter method of organization is a trim tab. It is designed to take things we are doing anyway and do them in a way so that we get more benefit more quickly, more powerfully. You are reading Discovery. You are making notes for cross. You are going to do cross anyway. All we're going to do is make it more efficient by putting it into chapters. Chapter method preparation is efficient, and what it's designed to do is say, when we stand up, we have a much better idea on how the cross is going to go. It is a more reliable cross, and it is less stressful because we are no longer at a podium trying to think of the cross. We are executing the cross. Now, there's another benefit that cannot be ignored. When you prepare chapters in next year's case, and by next year I mean January, you have prepared chapters for the rest of your life. Yes, I understand the facts will change, the cases will change, but the chapter method remains the same. So for instance, if you're going to use a document and say, let me show you what you said, and you write it out, you're going to do the let me show you what you said for the rest of your career. If you are going to impeach with an inconsistent statement, once you've done it once, your mind knows how to do it forever. We are going to get very good very quickly. What is going on in your brain as you begin to write your cross as chapters? There is a mental cost to learning anything. Writing chapters is a skill. And as we learn how to write chapters, we pay a mental price. But the price goes down constantly. After you get comfortable writing chapters in next case, you are comfortable writing chapters the rest of your life. And so the amount of energy it takes our brain to filter facts into cross-examination stories gets less and less and less. We get better and better easily. Notice what is making us better cross-examiners is not the amount of time we spend on our feet. What makes us better cross-examiners is the amount of time we spend in the office getting ready to cross, because these are the lessons we take with us forever. What we do in court is a lesser subset of what we have organized. And what we do in court on one case is a lesser set than what we have written our entire career. So in other words, we may have learned 50 different techniques and we need 5 for the next trial, but our mind stores them all. We win trials in a particular way. We win trials when the judge can understand our point at the time we are making it. If we do a section of cross and the judge does not understand where it fits, it is unlikely to be important in closing argument. Minds are made up. When opponents say to a judge, let me tell you where this fits, something I did 2 weeks ago, it doesn't matter. It doesn't fit. So what we are doing in this chapter method is we are teaching in such a way that judges get it as we are doing it. We have communicated in opening statement our theory. The opponent has communicated their theory, and we have given a fact-intensive opening. In other words, we haven't said, and someday you're going to hear about all the contradictions. We say, let me tell you the key contradictions. Someday you're going to see the documents. No, let me put up on the board some of the key documents. And what we are doing is called chunking. The brain likes information broken into little bites. That is why, for instance, in the United States, a phone number is 3 numbers, followed by 3 numbers, followed by 4 numbers. Now, the total is 10 numbers, but nobody in the United States tells their phone number to you by saying 10 numbers. they automatically put in a break, 3, 3, 4. Same thing is true of our Social Security numbers. We chunk them in our brain because the brain likes to break things down into smaller bites that it can remember. So the science of chunking is the brain breaking up strings of information so that they can be more easily stored as simple concepts. And we're going to play to that in the chapter method by organizing information into short stories. This also helps the judge with short-term memory. It's easier to remember the little story than the great big stories.
Larry,
Here's what your cross is going to look like. It's going to be a series of sheets of paper with little stories on them. And a story won't take more than one sheet of paper, because a story that takes more than one sheet is really 2 stories or 3 stories. We're going to chunk in our cross into smaller stories, and makes it easy to follow. In order to vote our way, the judge has to listen to us. Listening isn't always easy. We want to be the easiest person to listen to. And how we become the easiest person to listen to is we make sense. The judge says, I see what you are doing. Now notice, I am not promising that the judge will say, I agree with what you are doing. But we cannot get the judge to, I agree with what you are doing, until we have passed through, I understand what you are doing. We are going to be the easiest person for the judge to follow, because we're going to cross in little tiny stories. And these chunks we will examine. Find the events of a case. A case is a series of events. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, many of them are irrelevant. Find the events you like. What do you want to talk about? What are our big themes? They took advantage of us. They didn't tell us the truth. Or we paid them every dollar they were owed and now they hate the deal they made. What are the big themes? But now reduce those themes to discussions of fact. What happened? What are the individual stories that support our themes? As we now write, we think in terms of bundles. At first, we think big. We did everything the contract required. That is our defense. We did everything the contract required. It's enormous. But now let's break. We did everything the contract required into a series of chapters where we get the opponent to agree with as many of those things as possible. The contract required this and this, and on this date we did that. Then the contract required this and this, and on this date we did that. So what we're doing is we're taking our big themes, or if we're plaintiff, the defendant hid from us information that was relevant. That's a big theme. What are the individual stories of information that was hidden? It's these individual stories that we are going to form into chapters. At the bottom of every story is a mental takeaway. What is it we want the judge to take away? Now remember, we don't need the judge to memorize. There were 3 things that were promised, and the defendant delivered these exact 3 things, and they delivered them on these dates. We need the judge to say, the defendant lived up to it. It's another promise the defendant lived up to, or it's another promise the defendant broke. The mind rounds the theme to a takeaway. The chapter is not an answer. It is a picture. So our stories are helping the judge organize the case. And we are saying to the judge, you don't need to memorize. You get the sense of what I'm saying. You can understand my facts. You don't need to memorize. Remember, to get to belief, we must pass through understanding first. When the opponent often I see does material where I say in my seat, oh man, this hurts us. It really, this stuff is great stuff, but I'm not worried because they're doing it in such a way that the judge doesn't get it. And it doesn't matter that I get it. The judge doesn't get it. So sometimes we watch a lawyer and we can sense what they're getting at because we've lived with the case for a very long time. But if you say to yourself, the judge isn't getting it, it didn't matter and it can't be explained in closing. This is an example of memorization. The periodic table of the elements, I must tell you, it makes no sense. It is not a coherent story. It is about what things are, not what things do. And the mind wants to know, what did the thing do? Here is the mind of a trial lawyer. The Three Little Pigs is a story we tell our children, and notice how we tell it. We tell all of the story of a pig who built a house out of straw, and we destroy the house. The big bad wolf blows it down. And when we are done with that chapter on a pig who built a house out of straw, we do the chapter bundle on a pig who built a house out of sticks, and then we destroy it. And then we do a bundle on the pig who built a house out of bricks. You see how we've divided it up so the child can understand each part of the story. Now, think about this. Think about you had that book and you tore the binding off and you mixed all the pages up and you read every single page in the book to your child. Would it make sense? The answer is no. Now, notice this. We have given the person all of the story, but the method in which we provide it either helps people understand or hurts their understanding. The chapter method organizes stories into little bundles. I'm going to do everything about one thing before I do everything I want to do about another thing. That's a chapter bundle.
Larry, I have an interesting question related to what said. Should the trial lawyer introduce the bundles like before somewhere, like closing opening statement or before doing the cross-examination? They're going to say about X, Y, and Z, like the French Lovely method.
Yes.
Should we say I'm going to speak about the first pig, the second pig, and the third pig?
Yes, we would say
is that good or?
We would
and
say
when
an
we do the
statement,
method,
we are suing the defendant because they breached the contract. The contract had a particular term that they shall not compete with us for a period of 2 years. Now, and I show you that sentence, Judge. Now, they violated in 3 ways. The first thing they did was they began to build competitive pharmacies under a different name. And they built 72 of these pharmacies all around Brazil. I have a map here that shows the 72. The next thing they did, Your Honor, is they went into business with a competitor of ours as a partner, and they helped them develop their pharmacies. And they did this. Let me show you how. You see what we're doing? We're bundling it. Let me turn it around. Plaintiff needed to sell this business. They were out of money. They had financed the purchase of something. Here's the loan was coming due, and they desperately needed to sell something to pay the loan. And they sold us this business. And now that it's worth a great deal more, they wish they hadn't. but let me show you how they needed money. Let me show you the loan that they had to pay. Let me show you when it was coming due. Let me show you they had no other assets but this business to sell that would make them money. See what we're doing? We are taking our bundle and we're telling the judge the best of it. Among the things you can do to help a judge is to do a timeline. A timeline automatically bundles information. It chunks information because we build a timeline and we put the first key event up and we discuss it. And then we put a second key event up and we discuss it. And then we put the third key event up. Now, the beauty of this is look what we are doing. The judge is ever so thankful because once it is laid out on a timeline, it is easier for the brain to see the relationships. But we don't put the whole thing up at once. We put up one event and then we put up another event. We don't put up the whole timeline, we chunk it. Here's the first thing, then this, then this. Remember, when a judge knows, when a human knows how a case turned out, the ending, everything seems to fall into place. It all makes sense. Here's some chapter bundles. The person at the brokerage firm who was supposed to monitor insurance companies was an expert. The stockbrokers know nothing about insurance. We're going to do a bundle on the brokers were dependent on you for information. How about this in a dispute about a safety mechanism on an all-terrain vehicle? A bundle. There is such a thing as a safety mechanism that keeps the ATV from being started in gear. It is inexpensive to build and put into an ATV. You sell 13 models of ATV, and on 12 of the models, you have that part, a bundle. Here's an intellectual property dispute. You named your product in a way so it would be confused with our product. Well, how did they name it? What is the name of our product? Where did they put it on their bag? How long did they know it was our name? Here we had in the sale of the Denver Broncos, the man who sold the Denver Broncos, let me give you a feel for this. He sells the Denver Broncos for less than $100 million. The Denver Broncos, I predict, will be sold for somewhere between $3 and $4 billion. Now, he sold it in 1984, and it's going to get sold in 2020, but still, he missed a gold mine. Why did he sell it? He was a willing seller. He needed to sell it. Why did he need to sell it? Because his businesses were failing. We're going to have a series of chapters on failing businesses. These are bundles. In other words, a big theme told in little stories. We bought the Broncos on credit. This is part of the cross. You had your large payments coming due to the bank. Let's go through what the payments were. Now, your other company first was Kaiser Oil, and it kept drilling dry wells. We're going to develop the chapters of Kaiser Oil is failing. You had what was called a coal commission contract, where you were supposed to get a commission for every ton of coal pulled out of mines that you had sold. But the contract was abrogated. It was rewritten, and you weren't getting royalties. All you had left that was worth money was the Denver Broncos. So this story about you are an unwilling seller. Now, we're not going to ask this. The story about you were an unwilling seller is baloney. You needed to sell. You see, we don't have a hard edge. We can take people to an inference but we don't need the witness to give us the inference. We need the facts to give us the inference. Let me give you an example. We sue a trust department of a bank. It is managing a trust, and the trust has bizarre assets. Among the assets it has are debentures. Well, now we're going to have to define for the judge what a debenture is. It's an IOU. And it's an IOU given by a corporation. But a debenture, an IOU from a corporation, is dependent on the credit of the corporation. So now we're going to need a chapter on how the corporation was a lousy corporation that was losing money. And finally, your trust department knew that. It knew it had debentures. It knew debentures were dependent on the credibility, the credit of the company. It knew the company was losing money. I don't need you to say you were negligent in your management. I need a judge to say it. But if we give the judge the facts, the inference will pop out. Let's look at some more. This is a single chapter. It's easy to investigate the quality of an insurance company. Now, I want to go back to what happens if they call a witness and we don't have a document and we don't have a deposition. We are taking notes during the direct exam. And during the direct exam, the lawyer for this witness says, and by the way, you had a meeting and you understood that the assets in the trust were backed up by the life insurance policies. Yeah, and the name of the company was what? Apex Memorial. And did you hire? See, he's trying to show they did good. Did you hire anybody to investigate Apex? And we take notes on the answer. I do recall that one of my first reactions would be, we need to look into the quality of the insurer because that's what we do for everybody. The trust is purchasing an asset from an insurance company, such as an insurance policy. That's routine. That's what we do. We have somebody look into it. We are under contract with a firm that we use regularly. Now, all this got blurted out while we are sitting at our seat and did not know what the witness was going to say. But if we just write first reaction, look into quality, do it for everybody, routine, use it regularly, you could stand up and deliver a devastating cross. Your immediate reaction was you needed to investigate the quality. And you bred it, you give it a little, you did that based on your years of experience. You didn't have to have meetings. You knew immediately that needed to be done. Now, the reason it needed to be done, second chapter. Every insurance company has a certificate to practice, but they're not all equal. Insurance companies have different qualities. And now we're going to get into a chapter on investigating the quality of an insurance company. Isn't an unknown thing. It's standard. You do it all the time. You do it in all of your other trust accounts that have insurance. And I want to talk to you about how easy it is. I want you to tell the judge how easy. There are firms that you can hire that do this exact thing. They investigate the quality of an insurance company. And you've dealt with those firms before. You have their phone numbers. This wasn't new to you. And one more thing, this hiring a company to investigate the quality of an insurance company isn't expensive. It's cheap and you get a result quick. And that's what happened. It was cheap. It was quick, and you could have done it. See where we are? We are picked up on what the witness has said, and chapterize it into, you said some things I like, let me make sure the judge got it. Now, what we just did was a series of chapters. These are individual chapters. The big bundle is it's easy and routine to investigate the quality of an insurance company. The individual chapters are we're breaking it down on how you do it, how easy it is, and how everybody would do it. The chapter is its own short story. And chapters always have a pattern. They are a group of leading questions. Now you say, I can't get away with all leading. Fine, make it as tight as you can. Could we find what you did? Or if I know, did you hire a company? What was the name of the company? Now, I don't like that I say, did you hire a company? In America, I would say, you hired a company. I have a judge who says, I don't want you to use leading. I say, did you hire a company? It's safe. Why is it safe? Because he did hire a company. What's he going to say? No. What was the name of the company? How easy was it to get their phone number? Had you ever used the company before? See, what we're doing is if a judge says to me, I won't let you ask leading questions, then I'm going to ask questions where there is an answer and it's a certain answer, and I know the answer, and the witness knows the answer. So what we do is we chapterize, we tell a little story. And remember, at the bottom of a chapter is not a kaboom, you admit. The bottom of a chapter is a takeaway. A judge says, all right, now I understand something I didn't understand yesterday. I understand now that there are companies that examine insurance companies and that it's an everyday thing and that it's really not very expensive and it's pretty easy. And you even had them on your Rolodex. You could even find them because you'd used them before. Takeaways. We're aiming for inferences, for pictures. Now,
Larry?
I want to mention this.
Larry,
Yes.
there's a good question from some time ago, and I was waiting for the right moment to put it.
This is the moment.
Yeah, the question came from Jaime Figueira, and the question goes like this: do we need to adapt the chapter technique for faster hearings?
Yes.
As the Brazilian lawyers know, just to move on. As the Brazilian lawyers know, the hearings are squeezed since Brazilian judges have no time nor patience to listen a lot of the questions.
Yes, absolutely. The beauty of the chapter method is we may write out 5 questions and only need 3 or 2. What we do, though, is we write it out in chapters so that if we needed 5, we had 5. Judges get it quickly. And so often what's happening is we're moving through chapters very quickly, 45 seconds. And if a judge ever says, move on, it's a compliment. It's not a scold. It means you're taking too much time, but I got what you're saying. So yes, with a judge, we abbreviate. And remember, let us assume we are doing an arbitration with a judge that for some reason we know has handled arbitrations on financial products, maybe even insurance. To the extent that a judge knows an area, the chapters go much quicker because we have fewer definitions we have to do about the jargon. If a judge knows what an annuity is, we don't have to have a chapter on let's talk about what an annuity is. See? So it goes much quicker with a judge than with a jury. Now I want to talk about this. When we look at TV, when we look at the movies, we see people doing a cross where they do one thing and it's just, it explodes. Everything goes perfectly. Look at this restaurant. This guy says he has a chef that can cook Castilian cuisine and Mexican cuisine. They are different. and his chef is doing a lobster festival. How likely is it he has a chef who can pull it off? Where does this fit? In the chapter method, we do a few things well. We don't cook a 58-page menu. In America, we have a place called the Cheesecake Factory. It serves everything you can imagine. We don't do that. We do chapters on what we like. We do chapters on what we need. We do the best chapters. And how do we do this efficiently? We go in reverse. What is the story I want to tell? What are the facts that help me tell it? What is the story I want to tell? What is the document? Now, often one document fits into 5 stories. And so we may say, what is the story I want to tell? And what is the sentence in this document I need? And then what is another story I want to tell? And let's go back to the document and highlight for the judge a different sentence. Let me show you a problem and how constructive cross solves it. Pat Bowlen bought the Denver Broncos, and he makes various representations and warranties that he's buying it for himself, not for anybody else, not for a group. And it's part of the contract. And then after buying it, he places the asset in a corporation. And when asked why he did it, here is his answer. I don't know. Why don't you know? My tax lawyer said to do it. Well, do you understand why? No. Now, does that sound weak to you? Okay, look at the cross. We take the seller, Edgar Kaiser, and we say, now you're sophisticated, you're a shrewd businessman, you hire tax lawyers. Of course I do. In fact, one of your tax lawyers is so-and-so, and you think he's the best tax lawyer in all of Canada. And when your tax lawyer says, here is how to hold a business, that's what you do. You don't make the decision personally. That's why you hired a lawyer. How you hold a corporate asset is a decision made by your staff. And he says yes, because I'm not attacking him. I'm just showing, as a shrewd businessman, you hire tax lawyers and you listen to them. But now what happens? Now when Pat Bowlen says, I don't know why it's in a corporation, that's what my lawyers told me to do. Nobody thinks it's an unusual answer. It's exactly what you would expect, because that's what Kaiser said. You see how constructive cross disarmed the harm, disarmed Pat Bowlen saying, I don't know why it's in a corporation. Constructive cross. We get Kaiser to say he would have done the same.
Larry, of course, we have one question on style, talking about construction cross. Do you think that's better when you are more aggressive or when you are more diplomatic, and all depends on the style of the lawyer?
I think the more aggressive we get, the more risk we run. The power is in the facts, not in the voice. A voice and a gesture could turn off a judge. But if we catch witnesses saying things and doing things that are dumb and we're quiet about it, there is no objection. We just, and then you did this, and then you did it. So, for instance, the sound of this cross is not, look, where you hold your assets isn't even picked by you. It's look, you have tax lawyers. They're the best tax lawyers you can hire. You're particularly proud, in fact, of these tax lawyers. And when they say, for tax reasons, here's where to put the company, that's what you do. You see, I don't need drama. I need agreement, and I need understanding. So I shy away from drama. It is just something that can, but there's drama in the facts. You know, if you have a timeline of things hidden from your client, And then you did this. You opened 72 pharmacies under the name of. And here's a map of Brazil. They're all over the country. It's quiet. The impact is in the fact. How about this? A lawyer gets on the stand. I did not see it coming. And he says, I told my client never to do a deal with your client. I told him your client was a cheater. I told him your client was a crook. I told him he'd regret doing it. Now think about this though. What do we have? After being advised by his lawyer not to do the deal, what did plaintiff do? He did the deal. The more we talk about you as a lawyer told him not to do it and he ignored your advice, the safer we are. It sounded like it hurt us. We're being called names. But what really happened is after being told don't do the deal, you did the deal. You had advice of counsel and you ignored it. The brokers were told they could depend on you. That's the name, the title. Every chapter has a title, and the title of the chapter, as we will discuss on Wednesday, is for our brain. It is to say to our brain under pressure, here's exactly where you are in cross. Here is the story you want to tell. We may not ask the title. The title is for our brain. The brokers sell many kinds of investments, but mainly they sell stocks and bonds. But an annuity, that's an insurance product. It was your job to understand insurance products. In fact, you would do all the training of the brokers. You told the brokers if there are questions on insurance, call me, that you'd get the answer, that you'd get them the truth. Okay? So now what have we done? We took us 30 seconds to show the brokers were dependent on the expert when it came to insurance. We're about at the end. There's a standalone chapter. Sometimes we're going to do something and it doesn't take a big story. It's one chapter. It doesn't attach to anything else. It's a standalone chapter. Let me give you one. Expert says he is an expert in mental illness and the defendant is not insane. It's going to matter in a criminal case because he's pled insanity. But interestingly, it mattered in a civil case because he has insurance coverage. He is being sued for homicide, for killing somebody. And if it is an intentional act, there is no insurance coverage. But if it is the act of an insane person, then it's not an intentional act, and he has insurance coverage. Now, the plaintiff and the prosecution has hired an expert, and the expert has been published many times in great psychiatric journals, the best. And plaintiff says in opening statement, and defendant's expert has never been published. But here's a standalone chapter. The title of it is Your Articles Don't Matter in This Case. You placed everything you published in your resume. You're particularly proud of your articles. Publishing an article shows where your interests lie, and doing research helps you develop your expertise in that area. From 2006 to 2020, 2009 to 2020, you've published 9 articles. Doctor, every one of your articles is about hospital administration. In fact, they're on something even narrower. They're on tax administration and a tax-supported mental institution. None of your articles that have been published are on psychiatric diagnosis. We are done. A chapter scores what is available. It doesn't make things up. You cannot get from this, so you are not an expert in diagnosis. That's not what it proves. What it proves is stop bragging about your articles. They don't matter. See what we've done? We've simply, in 45 seconds, gotten rid of, stop bragging about your experts published all these articles. They don't matter. Now, you could even do something with your expert. You could say to your expert, you ever publish anything? No. Well, did you ever even submit anything for publication? No. Why not? I'm busy diagnosing and treating people, not writing articles. In other words, we could brag about it. Our person doesn't write articles. All right. Now, where are we going on Wednesday? On Wednesday, we are going into page preparation, how we are going to put these chapters on the page. And then we're going to do the only 3 rules of cross-examination that we need to keep a witness under control. And we're going to talk about science again, the science of anxiety, how we're going to relieve the judge's anxiety. We are going to make cross much easier on us and much more difficult on a witness who tries to evade. And we're going to do it without ever raising our voice. Questions?
Larry, I've been saving one question to the end, and it's a question from Daniel. And I don't know what's the case that he's talking about, but I think there are some important things to be treated over here. The question is, I, like many others, have watched the Rittenhouse case.
Oh.
I have no idea of what's this case it's all about. What are your impressions on the conduct of the attorneys, and do you think the strategy they employed do you think that the strategy employed by the winning side was akin to the one that you use?
Yes, but the winning side, the Rittenhouse side, had something that played to their advantage. In that state, if you allege self-defense, the prosecution must disprove self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant doesn't have to prove self-defense. The prosecution must disprove it. So we have a burden of proof issue. And it was a difficult case, but I don't know if it's winnable by the prosecution, but if it is winnable, it is getting into detail in a much more microscopic way to show at certain times it is Rittenhouse who is the threat, and the others are reacting to him rather than him reacting to them.
So just to point out, I put Rittenhouse case on Google, and it's the massive case that has been talked about for the past weeks.
Yeah, I would watch right now the case, the white collar case in federal court on the blood testing machine. And okay, because
that woman that was selling
yes,
revolutionary thing, and she was totally a fraud.
Because the cross-examination, which began today, is let me show you a document. Like, for instance, how come this document has the logo of this corporation on it? They didn't give you permission to put the logo on. And you knew, now more than that, you knew that it was on there because you handed it to, you mailed it personally. You see what we got to do? We got to get down to, don't tell me you didn't know. Don't tell me other people. And now let's go to another logo. It's another logo from another company. Let's talk about the Walgreens experiment. Now, Walgreens said, can we see X? And you said yes, but you didn't let them see it. You said, I'll show you the results, but I can't show you how we got it. It's a trade secret. In other words, we get into the chapters, the individual things of, you didn't, either you said something you knew was not true, or you omitted a material fact that would have made a difference. And the more of these we can do as separate stories, the better. I think there's an entire story on using the logo of a corporation without their permission. See, you know, how many of those did you mail? Did you print 10,000 of those? How about this? Did you print 100 and mail them to 100 investors? Right? And mailing 100 with the logo, and not once did you call them back and say, you know, I don't have the permission to use that logo. They really aren't sponsoring this machine. See where we are? We've got all of our cases. All of our cases are down in the detail. Fall in love with facts and talk about the facts you love. Think of it one more way. Find a fact you love and build a cathedral around it. Find a fact about which you can feel righteous and make a big deal out of it. And do it time after time.
That's fascinating because we all see those trial movies or series, and it's all about making the witness submit. But the one takeaway from many chapters that you presented here is that the important thing are the facts and how they relate to the burden of proof.
That's it. Because the judge doesn't need dazzle. The judge doesn't need showmanship. It gets in the way. The judge wants to say, what happened? What did you do? And when you do it quietly, the judge goes, I see. I see. You sold the property, and then you found out later that it was worth a lot more. And you say you got tricked. But wait a minute. Your own lawyer told you not to do the deal, and you did it anyway. You know, how much more warning did you need?
Great.
Well, Larry, we are receiving compliments all over the place here. And so I really apologize for the difficulties in the beginning, and apologize for everybody. And I was thinking that I could not make a test with 100 people. It would be the whole event. So we're going to find a way to solve this issue for Wednesday. But for now, Larry has recommended that you read chapters 10 and 11 for the next meeting. And as you can see, this thing is amazing, okay? And we need to use the best of Larry when he's with us, because there's a lot of information, a lot of techniques, a lot of great stories to talk between lawyers. And well, it's 9:07. Everybody's hungry, and so we're going to say goodbye now, and we'll meet again at Wednesday at 7 p.m. And if you have any questions, if you have any points, send us an email, and things will be cleared out. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
See you Wednesday night. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
See you all Wednesday.